you and I do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then I'm with Chris Spags on Wednesday. I called him Sal like 4 times yesterday and was very embarrassed by it. But Sal Vetri joining me today. It is Thursday, September 19th, breaking down the Week 3 slate, game by game. Going to hit on each and every one of these, give you all of the goods, everything you need to know to get you ready for this slate. It is a crazy one. Sal and I discussed a first look at salaries on Tuesday. If you missed that, check it out. All of the weekly shows are still relevant all the way up until Sunday. So if you've missed any of them, they're on Awesemo or youtube.com/Awesemo. But now that we have a little bit more information, some injury news, who practiced, who didn't practice on Wednesday, and a whole lot more, we can finally take our week 3 look. How you feeling today, man?
Yeah, not much. How's it going? Yeah, it's like you said, kind of a crazy slate. Injuries for the first time, at least definitely the most impactful so far this season. And not even just on offense. I mean, we have some obvious ones on offense, but on defense too, there's some spots that are going to open up and kind of change the way I approach the slate.
No question. And of course, we're glad to have all of you with us for today's show, which is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. I want you to know you can get $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which are as good as cash to play on the site. Not like you can't go to Walmart and start buying stuff with it, but you can use it on the site just as you would if you deposited money. And you can get that by going to awesemo.com and then click the MLB tab. You'll see the Spotlight Hitters article right at the top of the landing page. It's a free article, and at the top of the article, the Yahoo link is right there. I can't post it in YouTube. They don't allow us to do that, but it's right there in the Spotlight Hitters article. Click that. When you sign up through us, get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which is pretty sweet. It'll get you started off on the right foot upon depositing. They got the $500,000 baller for the NFL week 3. For week 3, you got $10 100K NFL, and if you're playing with a smaller bankroll, $1 to enter, 25K prize pool, 4K to first, some great free rolls, and some no management fee contests where everything that you put into it gets paid back out to the players and nothing goes to the site. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Remember, awesemo.com, click the MLB tab, and right at the top of the Spotlight Hitters article, you will see it right there, the Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports link. All right, Sal, 13 games. You ready to jump right into it?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
We got Buffalo. We got Cincinnati. Right now, Devin Singletary's status is in question. I'm assuming, and I'll get your take here, I'm assuming he doesn't play, but still waiting to see on word from that. If he doesn't, it's likely that Frank Gore will get a huge workload. Not that he wouldn't already, because Sean McDermott hates Devin Singletary, who is much better than him. But Frank Gore would likely get a big workload. He's pretty cheap. And on the other side of this game, the Bengals have just been beat up through the air by the Niners and by Seattle. It's a 44-point over-under. Right now, the Buffalo Bills are touchdown home favorites with a 25-point implied total, Sal.
Yeah, this game overall, it's like one-sided in terms of my interest. So starting there on the Buffalo side, Allen looks to be in another just fantastic spot. Right now, the Bengals ranked just second worst in defense overall. They got the best matchup last week, Buffalo with the Giants ranked worst. So Allen, the way they're utilizing him is fantastic. Like they're taking advantage of the rushing ability he has. It was a designed run that he scored on last week. It was like an Army-Navy game. He ran behind Frank Gore for the touchdown. So I like that usage. So far, Cincinnati's given up 5 passing touchdowns on the year. They rank 30th in the league in pass coverage, dead last in tackling. It's just an overall fantastic spot. And I'm not trying to like team stack or even game stack. I just want to get him with John Brown if I'm playing in tournaments. John Brown leads the team in 43.6% targeted air yards. That's 10th in the NFL for a player on their team. And it's not even just the deep routes. Like the air yards are good to see. But last week he had 7 receptions. 6 of those were less than 15 yards of an A dot. And 3 of them were from 5 yards or less. So he's being utilized all over the field, which is good for like a cash floor, but also just any sort of stability, not just relying on a deep touchdown. So I really like what they're doing with John Brown. He's 8th in receptions so far through 2 weeks. And then he comes in at 10th in yards with 195. You mentioned it, Frank Gore. I don't think Singletary, as of right now, all the reports I'm leading are leaning that he's probably going to sit with a hamstring, usually really tough for a running back if they tweak it at all. To get back in any sort of capacity the way that they were in like 6 days. So if Frank Gore is going to be in there, we saw them just feed him. Like you said, they're still giving him snaps. They gave him 20-plus touches last week. Cincinnati right now ranks 29th in rush defense. They've given up 331 rushing yards already on the year. You have to imagine TJ Yeldon takes on some percentage of these snaps, whether it's 20, 30%. But yeah, I mean, Frank Gore is a touchdown home favorite. There is actually some interest for me there just because of the fact that if you are banking on some red zone usage and this team being in the red zone, he's a cheap way to try and get into the mid-teens in points because of the touchdown upside.
I'm with you. Pretty much agree on everything you just said. Look, I'm not a big fan of Frank Gore. I don't think you're going to get efficiency from him, but you should get volume, especially as a touchdown home favorite. So I understand that. Now, this is under the assumption that Devin Singletary doesn't play. He didn't practice yesterday. They're considering him day to day. For now, I'm going to assume that he's out of this game. But the point on John Brown is huge. And as you mentioned, this Cincinnati team been carved up on the deep ball pretty much everywhere in the passing game. PFF has them ranked at the bottom in pass coverage. So all of that works really favorably for John Brown. But I don't disagree in that if in this game, I'm really not interested in Beasley. Like I had some interest in Beasley last week based on how bad the Giants had been burned in the middle of the field in week 1. But here, I just don't think it's necessary. There are some cheap receivers we'll get to. I just tweeted about one of them a few minutes ago, and that's someone I would prefer over Beasley. I have trouble getting there. For me, it's Allen and Brown. And if I'm going Gore, I'm certainly not playing him in the same lineup as Allen. The other side of this game, though, you've got guys like Tyler Boyd, John Ross, who got lucky as shit last week on that long touchdown in garbage time, finished with 4 for 112 and a touchdown on 8 targets. And then outside of him, guys like Eifert, who have been involved in the offense, but just aren't really showing any upside, at least not yet. I don't see it. And Joe Mixon, whose first 2 games have been, pedestrian would be giving him way too much credit. They have been absolutely god awful. He has 27 yards on 17 attempts. And I'll say this, Sal, I think San Francisco's defense is better than we projected it to be, particularly in pass coverage. And Seattle's not bad. And Mixon got banged up. But it's been a god-awful start for him. And it's not like Buffalo's run defense is a complete pushover either.
Yeah, I'm not going to get to anything Mixon. Like, there's just so many things going against him. You have Gio coming in playing like 40% of the snaps last week. They paid the man. He's probably still going to be on the field. You have Michael Jordan, who is a guard for them, likely not playing this week. That line is already just destroyed with injuries and coming in terrible for week 2. It looked terrible, and now they get another guard down. So just the upside being an underdog on the road, it just nothing seems right here to even have interest in Mixon on this sort of a slate. John Ross, you mentioned it. It seems like, John Ross right now leading the league in like receiving yards, but so many, if not all 3 of them, like just fluky long touchdowns last week in garbage time. I do think he actually plays a role in that offense as long as Green's out, which seems like AJ Green's not coming back anytime soon now. But not for this week. Tyler Boyd is the one piece here that I would have interest in. I'm not like game stacking, but the ownership, at least that I looked on the first run, it's just like criminal right now. I imagine it has to come up. It's single digits and very low. But right now, Tyler Boyd, last week, the thing that I wanted to see the most was an increase to his slot usage. From week 1, he had 45% of the routes run out of the slot. Last week, it was 65.8%. So almost 2/3 of his routes from the slot, targeted 12 times. He's second in the league in receptions right now. And I just love the role that he's playing in Zach Taylor's offense. It's just a matter of like between the $6,500 and $7,500 wide receiver range, everybody seems to be underpriced. And getting to Tyler Boyd in this spot, albeit the game flow is nice, it just doesn't seem as attractive as some of those other wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm with you. He has an ADOT of, I think, 7 yards, a 7 ADOT this year, which is not great in one sense, but in another sense, you're going to get more efficiency. You're going to have him converting more of those targets. I know you said you saw, would you say you saw 12 targets for him last week?
Yeah, was that it?
I saw 10, but either way, the only reason I mentioned that is because he had 10 receptions. So let me make sure here. Yeah, I'm seeing 10. It doesn't matter. He is very, very efficient. And maybe that is a result of, balls not being aired out. And you have John Brown for that, so it makes sense to bring him in tighter a little bit more. I don't know. I think you're right in saying that Boyd makes sense. Do you think Cincinnati will be playing from behind?
Yeah, I do. And then also just like the way that this Buffalo defense sets up is to limit big plays, more of his own defense, which hurts Ross. And then due to the low A dot, that should help Boyd, especially in the slot.
All right, let's talk about Dallas and Miami. Monster spread, no surprise, but I don't remember the last time I've seen two teams 20 plus point favorites in a week. It seems very rare. Right now, the Cowboys have a 34 and a half implied total. The Dolphins are at 13. They're 21 and a half point dogs on the road. You got a 47 and a half implied or over under. So you look at all of this, and the biggest thing that stands out, of course, is how bad the Dolphins are. There's really no redeeming qualities about this team right now. And maybe once in a while, Fitzpatrick will have himself a decent game, but he doesn't have the same weapons as he did last year with Godwin and Evans and Howard. So I expect to continue to see immense struggles for this offense and for the defense, which has allowed 14 touchdowns over the first two games, offensively and defensively. The biggest question here, Sal, is with Michael Gallup sideline, you have Zeke, who had 23 carries last week, saw that usage increase exponentially from week one. You have Amari Cooper, who's been fantastic over the first two games of the season, despite not seeing a ton of targets in week two. And then guys like Randall Cobb and Devin Smith with Dak Prescott under center. How are you approaching this game, and are you willing to play Dak along with Ezekiel Elliott in team stacks?
Yeah, so I think I am willing to go like in team stacks along with Dak and Zeke there. Like the correlation in terms of like throwing it to Zeke so far hasn't been adding up this year. Last year we saw it pay off a couple times, knocking down tournaments. But it's just a matter of like I have a lot of interest in Zeke, I have a lot of interest in Dak. So if they're going to get together in the same lineup, it's fine with me. So right now Dak, he just comes in as like a top 3 quarterback option for me this week. Or actually, yeah, ranked right now number 4 for me. He finished last week's game. It was insane. 23 of 23 is how he finished last week's game. He just seems untouchable. He's second on this slate behind Lamar Jackson in fantasy points per attempt. He has like an 82% completion percentage. And not only that, but like he's using his legs, 40 and a half yards per game through the first two. So Kellen Moore has him actually using something that he just wasn't using, definitely not 2 years ago, into limited use last year, his rushing ability. So I like Dak a lot. You touched on Zeke. He's probably my favorite pay-up spot right now at running back. I mean, he checks the box of being a huge home favorite. He checks the box of his touches, his snaps, everything came up like you were saying last week. What you would expect from this Dallas offensive line is that they're going to create running lanes, and right now only an 11% rush or stuff percentage for that line. So 1 out of every 10 runs is getting stuffed, which is very good. And Miami is allowing the most rushing yards, 195 and a half per game through the first two. It's ridiculous. So yeah, Dak and Zeke are interest. Amari's going to have a tough matchup against Davian Howard. He'll probably get shadow treatment. Howard shadowed and shut down Josh Gordon last week, 2 catches for 19 yards when he was on him. But you're expecting Michael Gallup, who he's already out, but who leads this team in targets through 2 weeks, gone. I would expect like at least 3 target bump for Amari. So you're getting more volume there. So if the efficiency goes down, at least the volume is going up. And yeah, the guy in Devin Smith right now, early ownership's coming in low. I get it. There's a lot of value wide receivers right now. But for GPPs, he kind of fits the bill. He had 14 receptions in the preseason. Again, the 15 targets for Michael Gallup are going to have to get split around somewhere. He came right in last week. He looked good, caught a long touchdown, saw 3 targets. And the fact that the ownership is low is something that I'm keeping an eye on. Randall Cobb, for me, viable in terms of team stacks if you want to go there. But I'd rather Smith, Amari, and Zeke ahead of him, only because for the most part, like Cobb was running in the slot. Michael Gallup didn't really run out of the slot. So in terms of role change, Devin Smith's the one who's going to see it. And then the Dallas defense is just a smash play if you want to pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, with this defense, I'm honestly not even opposed to paying for them. Of course, you have the Patriots who are cheaper, but I don't have an issue with it. We can get to some other defenses that might provide a little bit more value, whether that be the Panthers and 1 or 2 other ones. But I mean, there's just no question this is an incredible spot for everyone involved in the Dallas offense. For me, it really just comes down to, do I want Dak and Zeke? If I'm making groups, am I going to include Zeke in those groups? And so I think of it this way. In one sense, Zeke could have a huge game and so could Dak. In the other sense, I don't know if I need to do so, because I don't expect Zeke to be really heavily involved in the passing game. So if I'm doing this, my assumption would be that I'm rostering both of them in the same lineup, not because I think there's correlation there. Zeke's seen 2 targets in each of his first 2 games, and they should be playing with a massive lead again. I wouldn't be doing so because of the correlation, but just because I think everyone on this team, a little bit of hyperbole there, but all of the big names on this team can have a very big game. And that's kind of a tough decision to make, Sal. So in Zeke lineups, I may just say, screw it. There's a bunch of other quarterbacks that I could see having big games, and I don't have to worry about the negative correlation between Dak Prescott and Zeke.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, I don't think this is by far, it's not one of my favorite just team, definitely not game stack environments, but just the points that are going to be there, they're going to go somewhere. So like you said, it wouldn't be correlation reasoning. It would just be because you have like high projections on both those players.
Right, exactly. What are your thoughts on Miami here? Like I said, a 13-point total. Amazingly, it's not the lowest on the slate. Does anybody stand out to you that you think is worth running it back with?
Yeah, that's the main thing is like if you want to run it back and you really want to game stack here and get all the correlation, I mean, they're clearly their game flow is throw the ball here like 50 times with how big of underdogs they're coming in at. So Devontae Parker is second in air yards in the league with 310. Xavier Woods, the best defensive back, I would say the safety for Dallas, is going to be out for this game. So that helps Parker. But I would probably look more so Preston Williams if you were going to run it back. The rookie's snaps increased by 26% from week 1 to week 2. He caught 4 balls for 63 yards. And if Josh Rosen plays an extended amount in this game, they had a really real connection in the preseason and also camp because they both ran with the second team. But, I mean, that's only if you're running it back. I would put Preston Williams 1 and Devontae Parker 2 as like your options to run it back with.
Okay. Any interest in someone like Kenyon Drake?
No, just the issue there is like last week he was in a very similar situation and he still only played 50% of the snaps. So it's just not enough opportunity even as a pass catching running back.
I have a feeling he's going to be in a very similar situation all season long.
Yeah.
What are you doing with Green Bay and Denver? This one at Lambeau Field. The Broncos offense has been stagnant through the first 2 weeks. Packers are 7.5-point favorites, a 44 over under. Green Bay has a 25.75 implied total. If you're wondering where that stacks up against the rest of the NFL, in this slate, behind Dallas, behind the Patriots, the Chiefs, behind the Bucks, behind the Vikings, behind the Eagles, and that's it. So looks like 7th highest on the slate.
Yeah, so right now it's interesting through 2 weeks, and some of this is game flow, just getting up 21-0 last week, but it seems like LaFleur just wants to play slow. Like Green Bay's playing at historical slow, at least while Aaron Rodgers has been there, the slowest they've been playing.
Did you see the nonsense he said about Jamal Williams?
Yeah, I saw that. I did a requote about it, wanting to have even just reps. I mean, if he's talking about touches, that's ridiculous. But if he's talking about snaps, it's like almost there already. Like Williams played 47% of the snaps last week. You saw them both on the field, actually, because you had Jones playing 58%. They lined up Aaron Jones. So I'll start with Jones. He's probably – Adams is always in play, but like the wide receiver position is just so stacked, and there's so many other plays around him for cheaper that I do like. He has 190 air yards for the team, 7 more targets than any other Packer, as you would probably expect. So he's always fine. He's just like sort of a there play for me. But Aaron Jones, I mean, a home favorite here, or a decent-sized favorite. And, yeah, I'm not too worried about that touch count or really the rep count that he's saying. We saw Aaron Jones out-touch him 23-9 on the ground in terms of Jamal Williams, 13-5 week 1. And the only thing I would caution is that they got up 21-0 in the first quarter. So they're definitely decent-sized favorites here. And something like that can happen again. But it became very obvious that it was a hand the ball to Aaron Jones, his career high 23 carries, 27 touches. I did like the usage, though, lining him up in the slot a couple of times as a wide receiver. So at 6,100, I believe his price point is very favorable. And he's probably the only spot on Green Bay that I have like some sort of interest in terms of like right now building lineups getting to him.
Okay. Fair enough. I have him projected pretty solidly right now. I guess it just comes down to where does he stack up against other running backs? And I think his price is reasonable. I don't have any issues with that. David Johnson is not that much more expensive than him. Sonny Michel similarly priced, but who knows what type of workload he's going to see. Marlon Mack against Atlanta is another one that I have pretty similarly projected. He looks like he's questionable right now, so we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think Aaron Jones makes sense. Now, you said he's the one guy you're targeting here. I still have to ask about guys like Adams and Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Geronimo Allison. Anything in the passing game you like?
So, yeah, I mean, Adams for sure is just always in play for me. Like last week, got a lot more interest because just not even going owned at all in a week where he just was left and right just burning Xavier Rhodes last week. So he's always interesting. He's going to lead this team in targets every single week. MVS and Allison right now, no interest. Allison is just – he looked good when they were in a neutral situation early last week. They ran a little bit more 11 personnel, obviously at the beginning of that game as opposed to when they got up 21-0. Got in the end zone, but he's just not being targeted down the field at all. I think he has like single digits in air yards this year through 2 games, which is terrible. And then MVS, there's just so many better options, especially this week, that are cheaper that I'm just not going to be getting there in this game. So yeah, for right now, it's just Aaron Jones. And like you said, the running back position, especially $7,000 and above, it seems very solid, what you're getting out of your touches. So it's just a matter of, do I want to go down to Jones? It is a very good spot, though.
Okay. The other side of this game, Phillip Lindsay for the Denver Broncos, who, right now, like I said, have one of the lower totals on this slate, coming in at 18.3. Lindsay has gotten 24 carries over his first 2 games, 13 targets, which I guess you can take some solace in knowing that he's pretty involved in the passing game with a team that's been playing from behind. Royce Freeman also saw 7 targets last week, though, which is certainly worth mentioning. But as far as these snap counts go, man, they are dead even on the season. 143 total offensive snaps for the Broncos, 73 for Freeman, 73 for Lindsay. Now, Devontae Booker is seeing nothing, and that's expected. But Lindsay and Freeman have split snaps down the middle. You can always look at workload, and because snaps clearly aren't everything. But, dude, Freeman is not far behind. He's seen 21 touches to Lindsay's 24, and he's seen 8 targets to Lindsay's 13, which is, of course, less. But, dude, it looks like this is a 50-50 timeshare. Well, maybe a 60-40, 55-45 timeshare in favor of Lindsay.
Yeah, this is like in the NFL right now, out of so many 2-headed backfields, this is like the exact even split, like the one that fits the bill the most. The thing that I'm concerned the most about is, last week, like Lindsay's upside comes from the receiving game, in a game where, Joe Flacco in the first 2 weeks has thrown a ton, and still you saw Royce Freeman see 7 targets, I think 5 catches last week. So right now, none of them have any DFS value. Season long, it's even iffy for me in that backfield. It's just too even of a split. And then even with Theo Riddick coming back in like a month or so, it makes it even more murky for a guy like Phillip Lindsay.
So any interest here at $4,300 on DraftKings?
No interest at no interest for there.
Okay. Talk about the Colts and the Falcons. This game to me is actually pretty interesting. Falcons with a bounce back performance after a ugly loss in week 1 to the Minnesota Vikings. Massive 4th and 3 touchdown from Julio Jones, doing what he always does, coming up big. And now, amazingly, he's scored 3 touchdowns on the season already. I think it took him till week 17 to get a touchdown last year. Really incredible. But this game, starting with the Atlanta Falcons, we have, let's see here. Where is it? Okay, so 47 total. The Colts are slight favorites here, only 1-point favorites in this game. So 24 implied total for the Colts, 23 for the Falcons. Sorry, let's start with the home team. We'll go to the Colts. Marlon Mack to me is actually very interesting if he's healthy, and if we're not worrying about any injuries heading into this week. Sal, he's seen 45 carries over his first 2 games, which is exactly what I want to see. He even got involved in the passing game with 3 targets in week 2 after not being targeted at all in week 1. And he's playing around 73% of total snaps through the first 2 weeks. It's really hard for me not to have interest at this price point against an Atlanta defense that is improved and healthier than last season, but still not scary. And they're a speed defense. They're not big. I think Frank Reich is going to try and bludgeon their defensive line and give Marlon Mack 20-plus carries again.
Yeah, for the price point, like in terms of like going down, maybe not point per dollar, but just at 5,800, I think that's like the cheapest I go and definitely feel comfortable. Yeah, you said 45 rushing attempts. Right now, that leads the NFL in terms of just carries, which is fantastic, what they kind of want to do in this offense, especially with no luck now. But even in the receiving game, and just his snap count is great, and he's still running twice as many routes as Hines, which he's going to be on the field more in general, so that skews it a little bit. But it is positive to see them using him out there in a role where he's running routes, which is going to come through in more and more targets, more and more receptions. So his overall usage is great. He checks the boxes of being a favorite at home. He's cheap. He's only faced 8 in the box, 6.7% of his carries. Like that is going to lead to more and more efficiency for a guy, for the most part, who has been relatively efficient. Now he spends a lot of time behind the line of scrimmage, the most on the slate. Now partially that can be a little bit skewed in terms of running backs being patient. So right now it hasn't negatively hit him. I haven't seen anything, but the big thing here is that he's going to get fed a lot of volume for his price tag in a favorable matchup, favorable spot. And I really do think that 8 in the box at 6.7%, it just can't be kind of like screamed enough how low of a percentage that is, even with Jacoby Brissett back there. It's very surprising.
Yeah, it's a good point for sure. And my guess is that Marlon Mack doesn't really garner a ton of ownership here. I think he'll be owned. I don't think he's going to go completely overlooked. But I also think on this big 13-game slate where you have other running backs similarly priced, that you're not going to be playing a massively chalky Marlon Mack. I just don't see that being the case. As a matter of fact, I can pull it up right now and see what we have here for Marlon Mack. I think last time I looked, it was 13%. But if that holds true, 13% isn't a ton, but it's also not a little. All right, let me just pull this up because this is kind of important here. So, don't tell me I got to sign in on this crap. Come on. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this site.
Okay. Are you looking for Max?
I got it. I got it. Okay. So Marlon Mack, 13%. So among running backs right now, and mind you, this will change. Ownership projections will change for sure throughout the week. That's 8th among running backs. So like I said, not super chalky, not overlooked either. Who do you like more, Marlon Mack or Aaron Jones?
Marlon Mack.
Okay, so do I. I'll take the matchup here. I'll take being, even if a slight favorite. Both of them are favorites, of course, but I think this game has more shootout potential. And I don't see, with the Packers, even if it's not a shootout and the Packers go ahead early, that still very much favors Aaron Jones. What I'm saying, though, is I'm not worried too much about the Colts falling behind and abandoning Mack. I don't think they do it anyway. So that's where I'm at on him. What are you doing with the rest of this offense?
Yeah, so I mean, the only other thing that really stands out, no interest in like an Eric Ebron, even though he scores a touchdown, he's still playing half the snaps as Doyle. I mean, Hilton's out there right now. He's like surviving on just touchdowns in the red zone. I think he has 3 so far, but that's not his type of game, and he's not having a whole lot of air yards, which can definitely regress. But not a lot of deep targets to Hilton so far through 2 weeks. Seems a little bit scary. It seems like this team really just wants to kind of run the ball with Mack. We even saw Jordan Wilkins get involved with like 6 touches last week on the ground. So it's really just Marlon Mack, especially at a loaded wide receiver position this week. I'm not going to have much interest in Hilton.
Okay. Yeah, me neither, or Jacoby Brissett or any of these tight ends. For me, it's definitely Marlon Mack, and I like him quite a bit. On the opposite side of this game, Calvin Ridley coming off a big performance. Ronald Darby was just tortured deep all game, and Ridley was the beneficiary of a long 34-yard touchdown. Finished with 8 receptions on 10 targets for a score on 105 yards. Julio Jones doing what Julio Jones does against the Eagles. 5 of 10 with 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jones is an absolute monster, and that price tag seems to be as egregious as any on this slate, coming in basically the same price as Antonio Brown, despite clearly being the top target on his team, and it's not close. What are your thoughts on Atlanta here? 1 point road dogs, 23-point implied total.
Yeah, I mean, Julio's clearly too cheap. I'm sure he'll garner ownership. I'm trying to look it up right now. But he's way too cheap. All those wide receivers in that like 7K and high 6K range are probably underpriced. Julio's, if not the most egregiously priced, like a top 2.
18% right now on DraftKings.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's going to be like where guys like Keenan Allen come in and other players in terms of like where my overall interest lands on Julio. But it's tough not to like him at 7,300. You have Ridley as well playing really good. Ridley's just taking advantage right now of double teams on Julio. It happened last week. He has 16 targets so far this year. He's primarily playing on the outside. Sanu's running like 85% of his routes in the slot. So just directly benefiting from double teams from Julio that Julio's beating. So you can get to Ridley. It's an interesting price point for Ridley. He's too cheap, but again, just wide receiver is so loaded that in game stacks, sure, you can get to him, or team stacks, sure, you can get to him and Julio, but I'm probably not going to be prioritizing or having much of Ridley as I will with Julio. Austin Hooper, somebody who's interesting. I mean, he's third in the league right now in receptions for tight ends, sixth in targets, and he's just always too cheap. So you have a couple value tight ends this week. I think he's definitely one of them. And something else to kind of point out is that right now, Darius Leonard, the linebacker, very good linebacker for the Colts, I believe he's banged up. I don't know if it's a concussion protocol, but he's banged up. And it doesn't seem like he's trending to play this week, which would help guys like Hooper and some of the running backs. Devonta Freeman's price point is ridiculous, but I still just don't want to get there. The offensive line is terrible right now. And they lost, I think, another guy the last week getting nicked up.
Dude, it's been really ugly start to the season for Devonta Freeman. And I have respect. I have enough respect for the Colts defensively. Like you said, when you've got a guy that's priced where he is, and you know that he's had success in the past on a team that has, a better offense than most, you want to be interested, but it's really tough, man. I have a very difficult time with it. The Colts defense or run defense DVOA this season, however, has not been good at all, but I don't think it's quite as bad as it looks early on. So I don't know. That's where I'm at here. Where do do you have it pulled up on Pro Football Focus where they rank in rush defense?
Actually, I have that up right here. Let me do that. Right now, the Colts rank right middle of the pack. They're literally directly 16th right now in rush defense.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
The only other thing I'll point out on Freeman is, and it's not good, is right now in terms of like yards above a replacement, he is the worst on the slate in terms of if you put another running back in his situations, they would have picked up 44 more yards than he has. So that's worst on the slate out of every single backup as well.
Yeah, it's not encouraging. Let's talk about Kansas City and Baltimore. This could be one of my favorite games if it goes lower owned than expected. What I mean by that is last week, Sammy Watkins disappointed, and now it looks like it's being reflected in his ownership, and also the fact that Baltimore is one of the better defenses in the league, but they are banged up. They do still have some injuries. A few guys are hobbled. Watkins right now coming in at 7% ownership. Kelsey coming in at 10%. And mind you, the tight end position has depth, like Zach Ertz with Alshon and Djax not expected to play, Evan Ingram, George Kittle. There's a lot there. But when it comes to the Chiefs, who are generally very popular, Mahomes is coming in with virtually no ownership because of that price. I still see this as a game that can be very much exploited in tournaments, especially when you start looking at the expected scoring, because Vegas has this game opened with a 54 over-under. It's at 52 right now, but still the highest on the slate. The Chiefs have the 29-point implied total. They're 6-point favorites. And if you really dig into the numbers, it wasn't like Sammy Watkins was just left on the wayside last week for everyone else to do work. No, he played 92%, team high 92% of snaps. He was targeted 13 times. So there's just no way that Sammy Watkins should be ignored in a spot like this just because he's coming off a bad game. And if you take it a step further, there were a couple plays that were aired out, and guys like Demarcus Robinson and McCall Hardman connected on them. But that's not going to be the case every week. You're going to see Sammy Watkins still likely lead this team in targets. And right now, air yards on the season, Sammy Watkins is ranking 238 air yards. He ranks right in that top 10, top 15 range. So I still like this team. And if they continue to go on their own throughout the week, I'm probably going to go pretty heavy on them.
Yeah, I agree. And all right, I'm going to build a case right now for at that ownership why Sammy Watkins is the best play on the slate.
Let's hear it.
So, I mean, you touched on the air yards, top 15, like top 12 right now. He's third in the NFL with targets. These are just all the past stats, not coming into this week. He's top 5% in separation, 3.7 yards. Last week with Robinson in and Hardman in, they played on the outside. Sammy Watkins, you said it, 90+% of the snaps. He played in 79% of those in the slot. All right, so you're getting a talented wide receiver, probably the best one on the team, with the best quarterback in the league, going into the most favorable spot for a wide receiver to play. And Tavon Young, the star cornerback for the Ravens, is probably done for the year. It just got really bad for him. He was week to week. Now a neck injury is potentially done for the season, not playing this week. He was their slot cornerback. So a backup cornerback is going to be taking on Sammy Watkins, who's 6,800, sub 10% ownership. And last week in this same spot, both Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald in the slot went for over 100 yards. Christian Kirk was the one who had more yards. He was the one who faced the backup cornerback that was in for Tavon Young. That Sammy Watkins is about to face on 4/5 of the snaps in this game. I think it's the best spot on the slate for a receiver, especially when you factor in, like if he was 15% owned, I'd be like, yeah, this is still probably the best spot for a receiver. And he's sub 10% owned. So it's definitely because last week he burned people. The price point, the ownership comes down. And again, I'll say it. I said it Tuesday. If this guy's name was Tyreek Hill and he was 6,800, and again, not the same skill set, but being utilized the same way for the most part in terms of being put into the slot to get better matchups, yeah, everybody would be on Tyreek Hill this week. So Sammy Watkins is there. And you touched on it. 13 targets last week. He just didn't connect on a big play. In my opinion, this is the best spot for ownership and price on the slate for a wide receiver.
Absolutely. I'll take it a step further and say if Patrick Mahomes actually does come in sub 5% where we have him projected right now, team stacking, potentially even game stacking this could be the ticket. Look, it doesn't always work out the way you want, but with the way that the Chiefs have played, with the way that Mahomes has played, with how he is really honed in on Sammy Watkins, despite not getting the results